start, I just want to check the mic. Can you hear me okay? You can. Brilliant. Right, well, good afternoon and welcome. It's packed, isn't it? Because we've got the hot topic. So welcome to Growing the Women's Game, What's Next? I'm Kelly Simmons. I'm a sports consultant and board advisor. I am a board member of Women in Football, a proud board member of Women in Football, and I was previously, until quite recently, director of the Women's Professional Game here at the FA, and before that, director of Men's and Women's Development. And so really looking forward to a fabulous session we've got lined up with an incredible panel of people. So I'm going to get you, first of all, to introduce yourselves. So much is happening in the women's game right now, you know, exponential growth, commercial investment coming in, private equity taking more of an interest, high net worth individuals starting to buy clubs across the globe, brands getting involved. How do we keep up this momentum? And I think my last interview before I left the FA, a no pressure team that I left behind, I said that women's football would become, in my lifetime, the second biggest sport behind men's football, and I genuinely believe that. So this panel is going to explore what we've got to do to realise its full potential. So a fantastic panel. I've got to laugh because Claire and I decided to come out in the same outfit. Look at this! The rest of the panel didn't get the memo about the blue suit, so yes, we've got to get that out of the way because you've probably noticed already.
Thanks, Kelly.
Right, so I'm going to get you guys to introduce yourself. We'll start with you, Claire. If you just want to say a little bit about who you are and your role in the women's game.
Sure. So I'm Claire Bloomfield, the head of women's football at the European Club Association based in Switzerland. We are the sole representative body of football clubs at European level recognised by FIFA and UEFA, and work across a broad range of topics from sporting, commercial, regulatory and so on. But I had quite an unusual route into football administration and governance. So I was a football correspondent prior to joining the ECA, working predominantly in England for national newspapers and broadcasters.
Brilliant, and we're thrilled to have you. I think Jackie Oakley said yesterday that on stage in one of the sessions you're one of the real movers and shakers of women's football, so brilliant to have you.
Thank you.
Possibly the hottest property on the sports circuit at the moment. The new chief exec of the new code, Nikki.
Hi, I'm Nikki, but I love football. Although I did grow up calling it soccer, you might tell by my accent. I grew up in Canada. But football has served me really well through my life. And I thought I might, if it's okay, I might share a little story. When I was 29, I backpacked in Peru and with a friend of mine, and we were on this beach in Peru, I think somewhere in Mancora or something, and a bunch of guys started to play pickup football games. They took their sneakers off and were in bare feet and set up goals. And I joined in and started playing with them. And it didn't matter that I was a girl. It didn't matter that I didn't speak the language. All that mattered is that I could play. It also helped that I scored a couple goals and my team won. But to me, that's the power of sport and the power of football. It's an equalizer, it's a connector, and now in this role of NewCo, I mean, I'm taking the baton from this trailblazer over here who's asking the questions. And the FA has invested to build the women's professional game in this country. And so this concept of NewCo, and I keep saying this, but we will have a better name at some point. That is, well, as catchy as it is, we're working on that in the background. But ultimately, the opportunity at the moment is that the Barclays Women's Super League and the Barclays Women's Championship will become an independent company that will be owned by the clubs. And we're aiming to have that company set up by this summer.
Fantastic, and we look forward to hearing a bit more about that in a second. Victoire, brilliant to have you. Just missed out on bumping into you last week. I was in Milan. You were announcing your first fabulous purchase in Como, and we're going to hear about that in a second. But just explain a little bit about you and your role in the company.
Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be back, this time without a baby outside of my body. I was pregnant next year. She actually happens to be here. We had a little emergency this morning, so she joined. But I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Mercury 13. For those who don't know, we are a multi-club ownership group that until last week didn't have any clubs, but now we do. So we have our first club, and we're the proud owners of Como Women, which is a Serie A Femminile first division team in Italy. Prior to that, I was an agent. I started my career as an agent to Latin American players in the MLS, male players. I then became a tech founder with Gloria, which was a consumer product for football fans. Then was appointed by the United Nations as an ambassador for gender equality and football as well. And I've been doing quite a lot of work on the advocacy side. And as Nikki was sharing, I believe in everything that she said. I grew up as a football fan in a country like Argentina, where women weren't really allowed to play in a way, but I was a fan. And I always loved the way that going to the stadium made me feel, the community that I built there, the way that I just became a part of something that was so much bigger than just myself. And I always had this kind of idea in the back of my mind that it should be a lot more inclusive to women. And in stadium experiences and the way clubs talk to me, and they should talk to me as a woman and now as a mother. And so what I'm trying to do with Mercury 13 is build that experience and finally get the other half of the world involved into this beautiful sport that we all love.
Brilliant. Great to see you here. Diane,
Hi.
the early sort of pioneers of investing in clubs, stepping into the fold. Explain a little bit about your background and your role.
Well, yeah, I'm Diane Culligan, and I'm the founder of London City Lionesses, which is the only professional independent women's club in the UK. You may well have heard that it's recently been sold to Michelle Kang, who does a very similar thing to Victoire here. I have a background from grassroots and a passion for football and also the women's game and the development of the women's game. And I'm very, very sort of pleased to be here and very interested to know that people are interested in what I have to say. But thank you very much. And and that's me, really.
Brilliant. I tell you what, if I ever get round to writing my book, there's got to be a chapter on us decoupling London City Lionesses from Millwall one day. Yeah. That's a story for the bar later. Yeah. Right, so I've got a few questions here, and it's much easier asking them than answering them, I've got to say, I prefer this role. But make sure you're thinking about the questions that you've got, because we're definitely going to the floor, so plenty of chance for you to ask. I'm going to kick off with you, Nikki, because obviously the exciting news about NewCo and its creation. I appreciate that you're quite early in to the role, but just talk a bit about your vision for NewCo, apart from a better name for it.
Yes.
What's your vision for the women's professional game in this country?
So we say, I think NewCo needs to build the most distinctive, competitive, and entertaining women's football club competition in the world for the players and the fans of today and tomorrow. But what does that mean? I think we envision a world in the future. What that means is a competitive league in both leagues, both the Super League and the Championship, where every game matters, every game is competitive. The best players in the world, both from England and around the world, want to play in this league. Our top teams are European champions every year. Our coaches, there are more female coaches, but those coaches and managers are also viewed as leaders in broader society. Our referees are the best in the world, and they're respected by the players, the fans, the managers. Our England team is still competing in tournaments, and we have a really strong domestic player talent pathway. Our stadiums are packed because we have the best product, so all the fans want to watch it. And some of those stadiums are purpose-built for women and women's fans and women's teams. We're a revenue-generating operation that is delivering revenue for our partners. We're reimagining with our broadcast partners what women's football looks like on TV and how it's shared and experienced and viewed around the world, not just in English, but in other languages as well. And our elite athletes, are celebrated as role models around the world. And ultimately what that means is that every girl growing up believes that she can be anything that she wants to be. So going back to that power of sport, that power of football, to me, that's what success looks like.
Fantastic. And so what are your sort of early priorities to make sure that you get those foundations in place to see that vision realised?
I'd say two short-term priorities. One, we have to become independent. So we're obsessing and making sure that we're doing everything that we need to do to be in a position for that for this summer. And then I would say the second main priority would be getting the international match calendar right. I think you're hearing from, and I think some people might have mentioned it yesterday at a few of the sessions. You know, the players are screaming; they need fewer matches. We're killing the players, and we also need to make sure that, like, scarcity matters too. We have to be driving up the value of the game, and so just putting more inventory out there, I don't think drives the value, and that's something that I think collectively, globally, we have to do going forward. And having a thriving domestic league supports the broader ecosystem as well. So I think that's it's incredibly important that gets right.
Yeah, and so those who don't know, it sort of starts with FIFA. Obviously, put the international matches in the international match calendar, and then comes down to confederation level. So UEFA would put the Champions League in, and then it comes down to domestic level. So by the time, if you haven't got the chance to influence that, by the time you get there's an awful lot of spaces and slots that are taken up already, and it's trying to get that right balance, isn't it? But for it to be player-centred and get the right balance of sort of domestic and international football. And I know, Claire, that because we've been in the same meetings, I've been advising FIFA on some of this. We've been in some of the same meetings.
Yeah.
But I know that you're passionate about that as well. In terms of
it's
protecting
crucial.
clubs.
You used a really important word there, Kelly, when you said balance. And I think we really need to strike the right balance between club and national team football so they can both thrive and develop side by side. This is not about choosing club versus country. These two propositions are vitally important to the whole football ecosystem. But we have a tremendous amount of work to do. There simply isn't a bigger task on all of our plates right now than to determine what the international match calendar looks like. And it's not just the international match calendar itself, but in fact it's the supporting framework, the regulatory framework around that, which ensures all of the rules which are there to protect players and their roles within their clubs and their roles in national teams are upheld. So, yeah, there simply isn't a bigger task we have to manage right now.
Yeah, big job to sort out. I'm going to stay with you, Claire, because you developed the first women's football strategy for the European Club Association. So, and I know part of that, and this leads into a brilliant session that was on in this room just before this around governance. Part of that is around sort of governance reforms. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I arrived at ECA back in 2020, we were an organisation which formally represented men's clubs and had a relatively informal relationship with women's teams. But they weren't really a key voice in the kind of main stakeholder conversations. So when I arrived, obviously the plan was to build the first women's football strategy, also define who we represent. In fact, our membership base has increased 95% even since the start of this season, so now in excess of 500 clubs. And actually all of the women's teams playing in the top division in their respective country in Europe are now eligible to join our organisation. But crucially, part of the reforms that I was driving was ensuring we had women's club representatives on our executive board. And we have that in Michelle Kang, obviously the majority owner of Olympique Lyonnais Women, London City Lionesses and Washington Spirit, and Martina Pavlova, who was also vice chair of the organisation from Sparta Praha. And they were really crucial steps in starting to help the organisation, a kind of cultural shift that happened within the organisation, ensuring that the right voices are around the board, and prioritising women's football as a key area of business for us. So we've really been through a tremendous change in a relatively short space of time. It's 3.5 years, which is phenomenal, really. And as a football stakeholder, we're really leading in those kind of governance reforms and at that rate of change. Crucially, we also have 4 subdivisions, and each of those subdivisions has a diversity champion, so another female representative. So whilst we do have a big executive board, we're taking some really important strides in terms of addressing the gender balance in the room as well. So we're not exactly where we'd like to be yet. We've set some pretty ambitious goals about where we'd like to get to, but we've made, as I said, really significant strides in a short space of time, and it's been a real privilege to lead ECA's charge in women's football.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant work. I want to talk a little bit about solidarity payments, because I think a lot of the room might not know too much about this. So obviously, in terms of this country, professional women's football, ultimately there'll be the revenues that Nikki and the clubs will grow through the domestic game, but there's also that flow of European money through European competitions, and you've been involved in negotiating the solidarity payments, which benefit probably a wider range of clubs than people realise. Do you want to speak a little bit about that and the work that you've done there?
Yeah, sure. So a big part of our work is also in competition reform and ensuring that clubs have the opportunity to play meaningful games in Europe, and that we build exciting European competitions where the best clubs can play one another. They're also a very important development tool. As we were kind of going through the reforms for the 21 to 25 cycle, we secured the first ever cross-subsidy from a men's competition to a women's, and that was 10 million euros. That amount has now increased for the next cycle of up to 25 million euros, so we're certainly moving in the right direction. Yeah. But that additional injection of finance allowed us to be able to build a solidarity system for the first time. So that has meant that so far, when you have clubs like Chelsea in the Women's Champions League, the further they go in the competition, the more money they're generating to bring back to their domestic league, and then it's distributed throughout. So all of those clubs in that domestic league are benefiting from the development and the commercialisation of the Women's Champions League. We've obviously just secured a new Women's Champions League format, so we moved to an 18-team league phase competition post-2025, and the addition of a second competition, so providing more access for clubs to compete in Europe. Again, a really important development tool when we're thinking about trying to drive the competitive balance in domestic leagues. And we're getting really creative with the commercial concept so that we're able to not only fund those competitions, but also think again about how do we improve this solidarity system, because right now, for many clubs, it's an important lifeline. So it's really crucial that we take the time to get these decisions right, working very closely with UEFA. We have an MOU with UEFA that stipulates that we collaborate on these kinds of topics. So it feels like we've already made some really important steps forward, and now it's about how do we build on that.
Brilliant. Sounds like, I'm sure it's music to your ears, Victoire, in terms of a new club owner. Before we go into Como, just tell me a little bit about why you felt, because obviously your passion shines through about the women's game and wanting to open up to the 51% of the population who've been excluded, but what made you sort of think the time was right to go and raise that investment to invest in women's football clubs across the world? What were the sort of conditions that you could see where you thought, okay, I'm prepared to put my money where my mouth is now?
I'll say before I answer your question that when you hear this wonderful women and yourself as well talk, we're in good hands, right? The future of women's football is in very good hands. So it's really an honor for me to be by your side today. In terms of Mercury, I think I've been saying this for a while now. Women's football waits for no one. It certainly was not going to wait for me. I started this company 2 weeks before I gave birth, which was not the smartest idea I've ever had, but here I am, and I'm going at it as I can. And I think that the urgency that I felt was building up over the last few years. I started my career in men's football, and the second I discovered women's football was in the 2019 World Cup in France. I went to watch Argentina, my team that had never made it into the World Cup, and I remember being in that stadium in Paris and looking around and seeing that the audience was so different to what I was used to in going to stadiums, growing up. And suddenly, as a woman, obviously, I felt very empowered. I don't think anyone can deny the feeling that you get when you get into a stadium that's filled with families and there's women on the pitch. But as a business person, I was like, this is a massive opportunity. There's a new audience coming into a sport that has been successful for 100 years. And it's an audience that arguably is a lot more powerful than the male audience. We spend more money. We all know that. We're victims of it, but we do. We make a lot more, financial decisions in the household. We're also responsible for an entire family. And that should be reflected, essentially, in a way and in the product. And so when I was looking at the different things that I could actually do to have an impact in that, becoming a club owner felt like the right thing to do. Because from that position, could build a brand that would finally speak to women, could be very kind of thoughtful about the stadium experience, whether that's around having stroller infrastructure to making sure that the experience is really something comfortable for women. We talk about this, and I think we're all kind of acknowledging it now more than ever, but most of the places that we go to, the medications that we take, the food that we eat was never built for women. And there's consequences to that. We're seeing it on the players and their injuries. They're not, Michelle Kang famously says that, women are not small men.
Yeah.
Like, they shouldn't be training them and feeding them that way. And so there's so many different problems that come from it. But you're seeing this inevitable push that women still want to go, even though it's not comfortable for them, even though they don't serve them what they want to drink, even though they don't make it easy for them and their families to go, they're still pushing to go. And so from our standpoint at Mercury, we are looking to build a number of different brands that really target those demographics within women, because that's the other thing. Like, you can't just say women and stop there. There's young women, there's older women, there's working moms, there's LGBTQ. There's so many different demos within that, and they each deserve their club. So the big vision of Mercury is basically building different clubs that will target different demos and really give them a place where they feel represented, where they feel identified, where they're celebrated. Because being a woman is not easy. And I say it from, having not slept most of the night last night because my baby is teething and I'm here with her. And I cannot imagine, a man having to bring their baby at a conference, and I'm looking there and she's kind of crying, and I feel like football has this beautiful power of celebrating all of these hardships and all of this sometimes even unfairness of just being a woman in this world, and that's really the dream that we've had, and I could not wait. I could not wait for my daughter to be older. I could not wait for the perfect time. It is now. Actually, I can argue that it's too late in some ways, and we're very excited to be in this fortunate position and to also have the support of so many of the people in this room and everyone around. It's been amazing to see the feedback. I think it's
a fabulous vision you've got around that sort of multi-club ownership across the globe, and obviously your first purchase is in Italy. So what are you looking for in terms of, market conditions that would decide where you're going to invest? And I suppose leading to that, really, why Italy, why Como?
It's a great question. I think when we announced the news that we were going to start Mercury, which, by the way, wasn't by design. We got kind of scooped by a journalist. I wasn't ready. I really wasn't ready. I just had the baby. It was not the right time, but it happened, and it ended up being good for everyone. But at that point, we received so many clubs interested in investments, more than you would imagine. And we had to make sure to build a really fast way to go through them, to understand which were a good fit, what was a good fit for Mercury as well, right? Because, you have kind of, very broadly speaking, two ends of the spectrum. You have, big clubs that have a women's team, but their men's team is very much the leading force of that club. And then you have independent clubs, such as London City Lionesses, where it's only women. And, I think that at the very beginning of it, we realized that focusing on an independent club first was going to be the most flexible way of understanding exactly our role, because we're not only investors, we are operators. We get a majority stake in these clubs, and then we join their board, and we make sure to hire people to work alongside the existing ownership, but still very operational. And we looked at things all over Europe. We said that Europe was going to be the kind of the introducing geo for us for many different reasons. We can't afford the US at this point; it's too expensive. So we're here. And Como was one of the first teams that kind of really popped out for us, and for many different reasons. I think the first one, obviously, the location is kind of, without even talking to anyone at the club, we're talking about building brands that are interesting to women, and you bring in a location that's as desirable and aspirational as Lake Como, and you already make something out of it. And then as we started getting to know the ownership, we found this incredible president that had founded the team. That was this Italian man in his late 50s who was a feminist and had no idea about it, which is a very, very incredible thing to see from an Italian man, right? He was all about the girls. He was all about building this club that would honor women and female athletes. And he, from day one, he was like, speak to any player on this league, ask them how we treat our players here, which we did. We actually went and asked, and everyone had the nicest things to say, even though they were paying players a lot less than other clubs, even though it was an independent club with obviously different facilities to Juventus or AC Milan, but they were still something very, very, very special. And our model is very much around partnering with existing ownership, because we believe that those people did something right to get to the point where we become interested in investing in them. However, they need some additional resources, not only financial, but also on the talent side, to be able to ride this wave that's happening in women's football that is all around the commercial opportunity that is here. So Como was very much a no-brainer in that sense. I will give credit to my co-founder and co-CEO, Mario, who did an exceptional job at doing the diligence in record time and also closing the deal. Buying a club, doesn't matter the size, it's kind of the same paperwork. I learned that very recently. You sign the same amount of paperwork. It felt like we were buying Chelsea at some point, but it's the reality is that there's just a lot. And he closed the deal in a record 90 days. Deloitte, who were our partners in Italy, kind of said it hundreds of times to us. They're like, we've never done a deal this fast. And just that, it shows that we're here and we're serious and we're moving as fast as we possibly can. Sometimes it feels like the speed of light, but the moment is now. So.
Brilliant. I find this area really fascinating because one of my roles is I work with Patrick at Porters, who was on the previous session, and if we had £1 for every time we've been approached by private equity at the moment, trying to work out where to invest in women's sport, where to invest in women's football as the sort of leading women's sport, and whether anybody, at what point someone's going to step in and invest in a club that's a big men's and women's, and you sort of decouple that women's bit and invest. So I think it's a fascinating space to watch over the next couple of years or so. So Diane, coming to you, you were an early investor, so you were ahead of the curve on this one in the sense that you came in, you sort of rescued and saved Millwall Lionesses, and from that created London City and were the owner of that until very recently.
Yeah.
What brought you into the women's game? What made you sort of invest and drive that club?
As I said, my background was in, sort of grassroots and girls' football and actually boys' football as well, and ran a large sort of grassroots football club. Started a girls' division. That grew from 0 to sort of 12 girls' teams to women's teams. And, I just could see that if you gave girls the right opportunity to play, good coaching, and good nutrition. We used to talk about nutrition and all those sorts of things with 12-year-old girls and what they should do. Just really good opportunities, and they did very well. So we did that I did that for a while. I was actually sort of slowing down quite a bit because the club as a whole sort of grew to sort of over 40 teams, and you had over 1,000 kids playing football, and it just got really quite large. So, as I say, I was sort of slowing down, and then this situation with Millwall Lionesses happened, and there was just some notes in the newspapers that they were having to curtail a season. They had run out of money, and somebody suggested to me that I go along and see if I could sort of help them out, and if some of the ideas that sort of we had put in place at a grassroots level would work at a higher level. So I went along and had a chat and thought, well, yeah, maybe I can do something, help them out. One of the reasons why I sort of continued to be involved was you, really, because, obviously I was speaking to you about it, and you wanted to obviously make sure that the team didn't go out of business and the club continued to thrive. So Sue Campbell was another one who I spoke to. So we finished the season, managed to get through the season, and then there was a decision whether I would stay involved and what we could do. And that's when we had all of those chats, and I decided, well, we'll give it another year, we'll work with the people involved and see what we can do. And we had that year, and we got to the end of that year, coupled together. We had 2 players left, 1 member of staff, but we managed to get a team together, brought in Pedro Martinez-Losa, who was previously an Arsenal ladies manager. And as I say, we limped through the season. And in planning for the following season, obviously had conversations with the main club, and it was quite obvious that our ideas and what we wanted to do and how we wanted to grow the team and the women's division of the club were at odds with what they wanted to do. And so it was at that point I had another decision to make. And again, that's when obviously the great women of the FA who were building the women's game at that time got involved. And I had conversations with them, and I had to make that decision. My head and my heart said different things, but the decision was to go ahead, and obviously we rebranded and became London City Lionesses. And so the reason it was absolutely, there was a choice, but there really wasn't a choice, because, we had these women out there who were giving it their all. They're absolutely fantastic, but battling against things that was not allowing them to be successful, and I just didn't think that was right, and I didn't think that was fair. So that's what I decided to do at that point.
On behalf of everybody involved in the club, thank you. Thank you so much for stepping in. Otherwise, I think we probably know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in. You're a champion of the Women's Championship, obviously, with the London City Lionesses playing in that. I'm just interested, there's obviously a lot of discussion about, as the WSL grows in profile and revenue, making sure that there's a clear strategy for the championship and that it doesn't become so far away from the WSL that almost makes promotion and relegation really tricky. And we know that in the men's game, there's a lot of sort of debate about revenue flows down into the championship and the big gap and so on. What's your sort of thoughts about what needs to happen with the women's championship to sort of stop that happening?
Well, I think we do need to make sure that the gap between the top of the WSL and the bottom of the championship is closer. And I would envision that the divisions are bigger. So that in itself would make sure that but I think we should see them as one division. This may be in not what everybody else sort of agrees with, but I think, this is we've got, as you say, 51% of women in this country, a huge percentage of those are going to be playing football at some point as they grow. So I see that there's going to be more than 2 professional women's leagues in this country in 10 years' time. If we don't think that's going to happen, then I think there's going to be an issue with whether we can, whether that women's game at the top level is going to be sustainable. So I just see that the championship and the women and the WSL should be sort of brought closer together. Yeah. How they do that, I'm not so sure, but I think the other issues that we need to consider are the lack of facilities and lack of stadia, for example, the training venues, because everything is all connected with the men's game. And even if you're not part of a men's club, you are. There are, if you want to sort of hire something out there, they're all, the people that own those are men's clubs or men's teams. So in order to get access to those areas, it makes life very, very difficult. So I think there needs to be huge investment in facilities and stadiums and various other things, rather than just thinking that we can do it without addressing the other issues that definitely are out there.
Sure. I'm sure everybody in the room would agree that the strength of the whole pyramid is absolutely vital for the women's game, and certainly it was touched on yesterday in some of the questions that came out. Nikki, I'm going to come back to you because we've been, and then we'll sort of throw this sort of topic open, but the holy grail is this fabulous audience we've been talking about the last couple of days, which is younger, it's more diverse, it's got more women in it, it's got more purchasing power, it's going to attract new brands, etc., etc. I know you guys have been doing a lot of work around understanding the audience. Tell us a little bit about that, and I suppose the challenges of trying to build that and ultimately monetize it to make the game commercially viable.
Yeah, I think it is really exciting because I think what we've learned so far, it's obviously a different product with a different audience. I think both the league and I think every single club is trying to figure out and understand it better, and I think we'll build the right systems to be able to do that. But we've started our first qualitative insights work around that, just to understand better the fan, and also I think to simplify our voice and what that looks like. Like, obviously we're still newco, we say women's football is distinctive, but I also think defining what makes it distinctive and that visual language is actually really important. At the moment, I think it's like a feeling. And, going to a sold-out, Arsenal match for women's game is a different feeling than going to the men's match. And it's how we, I think, help articulate that in a way that continues to bring more people in. But ultimately, I still think it's obsessing the product. If we get the best players, the best competition, Diane says closing the gap. I mean, making it more competitive, having every game matter. That's ultimately what I think fans want. No matter who it is or how we segment them, the fans are going to want to watch great players and great matches, and that'll help to bring more people in. So, I think as we simplify it going forward, it's obsess the voice of the athlete, obsess the voice of the fan, and if we're putting our decision-making through that filter, I think hopefully we'll be making better decisions for this product going forward. But in some ways, it's also the other thing we've been trying to, I think, get to is how do you get to decision-making that is independent of the judgment of men's football, or what has made men's football successful? Because it may not necessarily be the same thing that will make women's football successful. And so when you look at the data, and it's hard, because I think depending which, if you're our generation, your lived experience is of men's sport. And so what you know of success is of men's sport. So, it's a human thing, it's not easy, but I think if we're looking at the data and we're trying to put the right filters on it, I think that'll help make better decisions going forward.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. I guess coming to you, Victoire, I mean, the key things that are going to be going to drive success is media rights, driving up the value of the media rights, the match day revenues through building the fan base, and attracting brands and new brands. And I guess Angel City are probably the leaders maybe in this field, have certainly sort of been ones who've been renowned for understanding the audience and attracting purpose-driven brands. What's sort of the early thoughts around how you're going to do that in Italy, and how key, I suppose, that is?
It is very important. It's very much kind of the beginning of our flywheel. We believe that when there's an investment made in a team, the first thing that needs to happen is that the team needs to become a professional commercial operation. And that is ready to pitch to brands and get sponsorship and partnership from those brands to ensure that it's generating revenue that is then invested into the club and the playing and the sporting side of things. When you look at that flywheel in men's sports, usually you get an investment, the first thing they do is spend on the pitch. But because there's a lot of motivations to spend on the pitch because you just make more money by winning. In the women's game, the prize money is nowhere near where the men's is, and therefore the motivation to become the most successful team on the pitch is lower. And I don't say that, and obviously I don't mean that our clubs need to be losing, by no means. But what I am saying is that to be able to truly build financially sustainable, profitable, not only revenue generated, but profitable clubs, which will in return give us the independence that we all understand that is crucial for this to be real successful, we need to find a way to make money. And today, that money comes from the commercial partners. And Angel City actually has been kind of they've been an example of showing how that is possible. They had tens of millions of sponsorship dollars without having played one single game. That is great salesmanship, obviously, but also shows you that there are brands out there that if you tell them this story and you show them what you're building, they want to be a part of it. And brands that have never been a part of the men's sports side, which I think, commercially speaking, is just a completely green field of brands. And there's going to be plenty of opportunity to get that sponsorship dollars without even competing with each other, right? Because there's plenty of fashion brands and beauty brands and pharmaceuticals and baby products and fertility clinics and literally any business that serves women that are willing to get involved. And commercially speaking, and this is where it's different from the men's as well, and what Nikki just said, you're so right. The fact that we have this sunglasses or glasses that we're looking at the world through, and even Kelly yourself, we started the question by saying, well, media revenues. Yeah. And the reality is that, in the men's game, broadcasting revenues are the largest, but in the women's game, they're not. And they will get there eventually, but right now, they're not here. And so we need to find a way to not only survive, but thrive during this kind of moment where the bigger ecosystem of sports understands what's happening, because it's such a big shift that I feel like even a company like Nike wasn't able to predict the kind of demand that there was going to be in their sales jerseys, for example. So if Nike cannot do it, what's left for all the rest of us? And so commercially speaking, I think that's where the clubs are very much empowered to be able to generate those revenues. They're not revenues that are dependent on a sporting result, which to me, and this is a personal opinion, always felt crazy. Like how you speak to the CFO of a big club today, and the way that they plan their whole financial year is around where they're going to make it within the Champions League. And they have different scenarios, but basically it's making it into this tournament and then actually getting to the top of that tournament that will dictate the whole financial planning. And then we wonder why men's football is not profitable in many ways, or it's such a bad business, like a lot of people say. So I really believe that we have this opportunity to remove those lenses for the ones of us that have been in the sport for very long, and then actually partner with people that don't have those lenses on to find a way to make this a business that has its own two legs and that can, in my opinion again, but I'm 100% sure, and I'm betting my entire career on this, that we're going to be more successful revenue-wise than the men's game. Because we get to correct the things that didn't work on the men's side, because we're rethinking football as a true business that is profitable. That is the bar, not revenue generating, profitable. So.
See, Victoire's more ambitious than me. I said second biggest sport. After men's football, you're going top in your ambition.
Yeah, you
quite
gotta
right too. Fabulous. We've got some time for so I knew the hands would go up quickly. While the mic, because we'll need the mic because it's obviously online this session. So if we get the mic to we'll go down the front to start with. While we're talking brands, just a big thank you to Barclays, who obviously are a partner of Women in Football and helped us deliver these 2 incredible days, and they were the ones who backed the Women's Super League, the Women's Championship before it was sexy and before it took off. So they believe. So, and I know they're here. So big thank you. And we have, I'm afraid, ran out of time. I've had the stop. So first of all, thank you to Sky Sports who sponsored this panel and are a huge supporter of the women's game, and a massive thanks to our fabulous stellar panel, Claire, Nikki, Victoire, Diane. Thank you very much.